Hello again, LifePointe Church. Great to be back with you. Here we are for yet another week of shelter in place, and um, you know, hopefully things will change soon. We look forward to that. It seems like things are changing, and we'll keep you in touch on when the church will be meeting back again. But in the meantime, I'd like to share some words with you. Um, one of the things that I notice when we read through the Gospels, I mean, there's so many wonderful things taught and said and done by Jesus there that there's one thing though that's always pretty interesting to me, and that's often captured the minds of lots of different people as we see the love that Jesus had for some of the children during the time. Uh, Children in our society, and especially in their times, were often neglected and treated in ways that were deemed less important than some adults, and we see this attitude several times in the Gospels, even as Jesus' disciples would, shoo the children away from Jesus, thinking that he wouldn't have time for them or that their matters weren't important or simply they couldn't understand um, some of the things that were being discussed. However, we see that Jesus both loved the children and saw in them some qualities that were useful to teach his disciples on things that we should imitate, and things that children just often do better or easier than the rest of us. One example that we can see of this is in Matthew 18, verses 1 through 5. And it says, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' He called a little child and had him stand among them. And he said, 'I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me.'" So here we see that even his disciples, his students, his followers were not truly understanding quite yet, and they needed to learn from the example of this child. See, they were concerned about being who was going to be considered the greatest in the kingdom, each likely desiring to have a place of honor, the place of greatest honor among their others, to be exalted in their position. But Jesus directs their attention to this young child. Jesus highlights the humility of such a young child. Young children usually recognize that they are much smaller than the adults. They often recognize that they're at the mercy of adults in many ways. The image that comes to my mind is a young child who would rather hide behind their mother or their father's leg as they grasp them for safety and defense. That child's not assuming or desiring to be honored and respected by others, seeking to uh, to rule over others, but instead they seek refuge in their parent. They trust that the parent has their best interest in mind and will take care of them, and they're comforted just by the presence of their parents. Jesus tells his disciples to be like little children if they even want to get into the kingdom, and to humble themselves like this particular child if they desire to be the greatest in the kingdom. Because the greatest are those who are like Jesus. Jesus didn't consider his position something so great that he had to cling to its power and cling to its position. Instead, he humbled himself, making himself lower than the angels. It says, coming into a human body, into the flesh, with the purpose to humble himself to even serve man, to serve those around him, to even wash their feet at times. Later in the book, we also read that children are brought to him, to Jesus, and his disciples attempt to rebuke the parents for doing this, for troubling Jesus with their children. But Jesus says, "No, let the little children come to me." And again, he points out that the kingdom belongs to people who are like these children. So, even as many of us adults are capable of understanding much greater things than children, and we have much higher thoughts than children, and we can do much greater deeds than them, let's not forget that in many ways we are needed to be like little children before God, resting in his safety, being humble towards Him and others, following His leadership, and trusting in His words over our tiny little bits of life experience and knowledge. And with that, I want to present to you my younger children as they wanted to share in music and songs that they've learned from their time at LifePointe Church in KidZone and um, in other ministries there. And they chose the songs, they chose their attire, they chose their instruments, and wanted to do something to encourage the children of LifePointe and um, anyone else. So, hope you enjoy.
Okay, we're about to sing Father Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right on. Father Abraham had many sons, many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right arm, left arm. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right arm, left arm, right leg. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right arm, left arm, right leg, left leg. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right arm, left arm, right leg, left leg. Turn around. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. And so let's all praise the Lord. Right arm, left arm, right leg, left leg. Turn around, sit down.
All right, good job. All right, what's the next one?
Jesus loves me.
All right, stand up. Tell us what it is.
Who wants to lead it? Gwendolyn.
No.
Me?
Yeah, tell us.
This is Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong. They are weak, but He is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me, He who died. Heaven's gates are open wide. He will wash away our sins. Let the little child come in. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
All right, one more?
No, two more.
Oh, two more?
Yes.
All right, what's the next one?
My God is so big.
All right, ready? Tell us.
Next we have My God is so big. My God is so big, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do for you. My God is so big, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing of it, but we start.
Is this a special one from
Mrs. Hawthorne.
from Mrs. Hawthorne? All right. Okay.
This song's from Mrs. Hawthorne.
All right.
Ready? Everyone, it is really true. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus loves you. He loves you in the morning. He loves you in the night. He loves you when you're wrong, and he loves you when you're right. Jesus, so everyone, it is really true. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus loves you. We actually started singing the wrong ones.
All right. Good job. Say goodbye to everyone at LifePointe Church.
Bye!